What will happen to the two monsters that have just been sentenced for the murder of Preston Davey, a 13-month-old boy? It is an absolutely tragic case, and absolutely harrowing and disturbing. This is one of the worst cases you will have ever heard, and the majority of people watching this channel will have heard of it, because I did, at the start of the trial, I did do a video on this, and I did say I would keep you updated. They were found guilty 2 days ago, and today, 18th of June 2026, they have been sentenced. And Jamie Varley, absolute monster, has been sentenced to a whole life order, meaning he will never be released from prison, and rightly so. And his gay partner was sentenced to 25 years in prison for his role in the little one's death. These two wrong'uns are in for a right time inside of prison, and rightly so. Prison justice is awaiting these two absolute horrors. Now, Jamie Varley is 37-year-old with the rest of his life ahead of him inside of prison. He will be a bigger target than anybody that has been in the system in recent times. Ian Watkins, who was executed, and Kyle Bevan. Jamie Varley is actually worse than these two, so you can imagine what awaits him. But some of the details within this case, which I'm going to talk about now, then I'm going to get back to what they can expect inside of prison. Now, young baby Preston, 13 months old, was adopted by Jamie Varley and John McGowan-Fazakerley, if that's how you pronounce the last word, but I'll just refer to him as John McGowan, the Beast. These two gay partners, 32-year-old John and 37-year-old Jamie Varley. This was actually in 2023, July 2023, when the little one died. It was absolutely tragic. So at 9 months old, he was adopted by these two. And John Varley was a teacher. This is probably the reasons why he was regarded as being eligible to adopt this little one, and how it went unnoticed with all the hospital visits, 3 hospital visits, absolutely horrendous. So he was adopted at 9 months old, and 4 months later, he was dead. It is an absolutely tragic case, and I'm sure the majority of you will have seen this because it has went viral, and there is a lot of details that I'm going to mention now that you probably will not be aware of. The fact that his death, little Preston's, was on the July the 27th, 2023, when he was rushed to hospital, unresponsive and in a cardiac arrest. Varley initially claimed the child accidentally drowned after being left alone in the bath for a couple of minutes. However, medical staff noted the child's hair and clothing were completely dry. The official cause of death was determined to be acute upper airway obstruction caused by smothering or objects forced into his mouth. Now you know exactly what has went on. Something forced into that baby's mouth. When they done a post-mortem, he had suffered 40 separate injuries, including 30 external bruises, internal trauma, and a fractured left arm. The internal trauma and the injuries were caused because of what these beasts, these bacons, had been doing to this little one. It is absolutely unimaginable, and it is too graphic to actually go into the details on here about what they'd actually done. But if you haven't already seen this case, like I've said, I'm sure the majority of you will, but some of my viewers and subscribers are from around the world, all over Europe, Australia, America. You will probably not be aware of this case. These two horrors adopted this little one at 9 months old, and for 4 months they inflicted catastrophic injuries, and they were doing absolutely horrific things to this little one. They were, I can't even say the words because it will flag up on here. They were doing things that were despicable. These were Bacon's nonsense. So you know what I'm saying, what they were actually doing to the little one. And he had internal injuries of what they were doing. He died because of upper airway obstruction, because something was forced in his mouth. Absolutely harrowing. So that is the case, and that is what happened. But little Preston's mother, Preston had a bad start in life. Preston's mother had been to prison herself. She was in prison for a murder at the age of 14-year-old. Her and an accomplice who was the same age, I believe, murdered a 71-year-old lady, and they were sentenced to life in prison with a recommendation of 8 years. But she was in and out of prison. After she'd done a minimum term, was released and in and out. She obviously fell pregnant, but within 5 days, the social took the child from her, even though she was begging that she had turned her life around. She wanted to keep the little one because she'd been to prison at the age of 14. They would not allow it. And the baby's mother, her mother, the baby's grandma, said she would adopt the baby. She wanted the baby. She wanted baby Preston to look after and nurture and make sure he was fine. But because she had breast cancer, the social said, no, you are not fit for purpose. So we're going to hand him over to two beasts. That social in Blackpool, this happened in Blackpool. These social services have got blood on their hands. They must be disgusted with themselves, knowing what had actually happened and what went down. But like I've said, over the space, a short 4 months, he was in the care of them two beasts for 4 months, and straight away they were acting out their sick fantasies on that little one, and he ended up dead. But 3 separate occasions he was in hospital. Why wasn't the alarm bells ringing? Why wasn't he checked to make sure he was fine? He talked his way out of it. John Varley, the former school teacher from Blackpool, was talking his way out every time, and he was convincing. But what is actually more sickening, after they were arrested, the day after Preston died, they were arrested. But guess what? They were released on unconditional bail. And for 2 years, they lived together. So I've just got the timeline up here. So the initial arrests were July, arrested on suspicion of everything that I've just went over there. And they were living together for 2 years until they were remanded into custody, which was, so from July 2023 to June 2025, they were living together. Then on June 2025, after they decided to charge them, in June 2025, they were officially rearrested and formally charged. They were remanded into custody following their appearance at Lancaster Magistrates Court on June the 13th, 2025. So from June up until June of this year, they spent, it says, roughly 10 months. That's 12 months if you do the maths, leading up to the trial, which was in April of this year. And that's when I covered it. It went on for 8 weeks. But I can't actually believe they were released on bail to live together after all of these injuries had come to light. What the actual absolutely disgusting, cannot believe. Like I've said, this youngster has been so badly let down and mistreated. His mother wanted him. Then the grandmother wanted him. The grandmother, by the way, is now cancer-free. So she could have been living, or this little one, could have been living with his grandma, who would have looked after him, nurtured him, and made sure he came to no harm. But because she had breast cancer, the social said, no, you have nothing more to do with him ever again. He's getting adopted. You'll never see him again. Absolutely outrageous. And to give a little one to two gay men living together without doing checks is absolutely atrocious, outrageous. It is beyond belief. Going to hospital 3 times and then not even following up to see what had actually went on. But it doesn't say where they were held on remand. I have tried to find out and have a look. But because they were up in Preston Crown Court, it would have been either HMP Manchester, formerly Strangeways, or HMP Liverpool. And that is where they would have went back to after they have been sentenced today. But they will not be in them prisons for very long. They will, Varley, Jamie Varley, just get his picture up here so people can be aware of who he is. Because there is a lot of prisoners watch this channel, by the way, people. So that is Varley, and that is McGowan, who got 25 years. What an absolute piece of work. And the pictures of poor little Preston. What a cute little baby that deserved so much more and so much care. May he rest in peace. What those two despicable creatures done to him was absolutely beyond belief. But like I've said, they are now languishing in prison. Varley for the rest of his life, the rest of his sorry days, and McGowan doing 25 years. 25 years, I do believe it is either 2/3 when it's violence. It wasn't automatically half, so it would have been 12 and a half years, but I think when it's violence, it is actually 2/3. Don't quote me because they do change it all the time, but half if it is non-violent, 2/3 if it is violence. But he will be going into a high security prison as well. They will be kept apart. These two wrong-uns will not be held in the same prison and definitely not on the same wing. So he will be going to HMP Wakefield. But guess what, people? HMP Wakefield is 60-40. 60% predators, beasts like him, and 40% normal location prisoners, all mixed in together. What do you think a normal location prisoner, a psychopathic killer, who is a lunatic, who has children himself, even though he's a lunatic, there is the care and nature towards little ones. So you get this lunatic, big, mad, deranged lunatic who is in for killing, maybe he's a gang rival or a man, something of the sort, nothing to do with kids, and Varley comes walking onto the wing. What do you think's going to happen? This deranged lunatic killer is going to act out prison justice just as Ian Watkins suffered. He was executed by another inmate inside of his pad who sliced open his neck, his jugular, and he was dead within minutes. Varley is worse than these. He is worse than Ian Watkins, and he's worse than Kyle Bevan, even though it is hard to get worse than them two, because Kyle Bevan, the trial is ongoing at the moment for the 3 that allegedly murdered him. And he was in for killing his 2-year-old stepdaughter, his girlfriend's baby. And he was executed, stabbed 30 times inside of his cell because of what he was in for and because the lads that done it wanted to be removed out of Wakefield prison. And Ian Watkins, he was doing similar things with infants, absolute wronging. He never killed any babies though. And he was executed because he's an absolute wrong'un. So Varley is in for a hell of a time, and so is John McGowan. Like I say, he hasn't got as long to spend inside of prison, but even if it was half, which was 12 and a half years, 12 and a half years with a target on your back is a long time inside of prison. So what else, apart from executing, will happen to them inside of prison? Prison napalm. Boiling hot water out of a kettle with sugar, honey, and other sticky, obnoxious substances that will stick to the face and absolutely peel off his putrid skin. And that is what they use. But they also boil up oil out of the kitchens, cooking oil, which peels the skin from their faces. And obviously a Mars bar. A lot of them are walking around with a big scar in prison. You'll see he's got a Mars bar. It's rhyming slang, Mars bar scar. Or if someone says, I'll give you a ball of spice if you give him a Mars bar. Ball of spice might be 100 quid. They'll get that spice and they'll go and give someone a Mars bar, also known as a stripe. And these stripes can have 2 blades in, which is a double blade, which I've seen inside of prison, and I've seen the aftermath because they can't stitch it up. If they try to stitch that one, the other one would open. So they have to leave the wound, obviously glue it up or whatever. And the one lad that I did see inside of Franklin, who had the double Mars bar, the scar on his face looked like a finger. It was that thick, the scarring. Sometimes they use 3 as well. Spread out like that, which absolutely rips the face apart, or from behind, big stripe down the back. This is what they will be facing inside of prison because, like I've said, number 1 targets, more so Jamie Varley, because John McGowan, the people who haven't seen the case or read about it or seen it on the news, which I forgot to mention, Jamie Varley, because he was the one that was found guilty of the child's murder, he was the one who was alone in the house whilst his partner was at work. He rang him up, said, come back, something's not right. And he tried to blag it with him. Obviously, he knew what he'd done. He was doing things in the house all alone by himself with that little one. And he tried to get out of it by saying the little one had drowned. But because McGowan wasn't in the house at the time, he was just charged and found guilty of allowing the death. But it should have been life with a minimum of 25 years, but it doesn't matter because he might not even make it out of prison alive. But I will keep you updated because, like I say, this is explosive. This is viral. This is viral. Varley viral. Varley is viral in the system, and he will be getting his comeuppance. It will not be long, people, before the news is coming on here about Varley being attacked, because he will be put inside of the segregation unit for a number of weeks, could even be months, because the prison service at the moment is under intense pressure because of all the murders that have been happening. The Bacons have been getting bashed well and truly, and I can't wait to get little Mr. Piggy, the Bacon Basher, out when we hear the news of Varley getting his prison treatment. And I will keep you updated on here. But like I say, he'll be in segregation unit because the prison service cannot have this on their hands, especially if he's in Wakefield after the most recent murders, because the governors and the screws on duty will be held accountable and there will be questions asked. How did this happen to someone who was so high profile? because there is security protocols for these high-profile prisoners, and they'll be very wary to let him back on the wings. I wouldn't be surprised if he ends up in HMP Frankland on A Wing with the rest of the beasties where Huntley was taken out. Ian Huntley got executed inside of HMP Frankland, and he could be taking his place with the likes of Wayne Couzens, Levi Belfield, the Morgue Monster, people of the sort, the worst of the worst. So that is probably where he will end up. But just because he's on protection, people, don't think he won't be got at, because these three recent murders, Watkins, Bevins and Huntley, all happened on the Bacon wings. Bacon's taken out Bacon's, a real sausage fest. Proper bacon bashing at its finest. But I will keep you updated, people, and I'll let you know exactly what goes on. But we will spare a thought for poor baby Preston Davey. May he rest in peace. What a shocking and horrible, despicable crime, and he was let down so badly. But I'm going to leave that one there for now, people. Hopefully you are enjoying the content. If you are, remember to comment, like and subscribe. Take care, everyone. Enjoy the rest of your day. But most importantly, people, stay safe.